Jinwoo arrived promptly for the A-rank raid undertaken by Strike Squad B. The miners welcomed him warmly, a stark contrast to the previous day's apprehension. The camaraderie and sense of normalcy momentarily brought back forgotten memories for Jinwoo, a feeling he wouldn't mind getting used to. After a productive morning, the mining team received a request from Strike Squad B for a porter. As their designated one hadn't shown up, the miners, however, were hesitant. The risk of entering an A-ranked dungeon, especially for low-ranked hunters like themselves, was far too high. Jinwoo, however, surprised everyone by volunteering. The miners were shocked. They tried to dissuade him, highlighting the dangers and the fact that Jinwoo, being an E-rank, was woefully underprepared for such a task. Jinwoo, however, remained resolute. He saw this as an opportunity to learn from another Strike Squad's raid strategy, especially considering it was an A-ranked dungeon. Sun Ki-hoon, the leader of Strike Squad B, readily accepted Jinwoo's offer despite the initial disapproval from the miners. As they entered the vast A-rank gate, Jinwoo couldn't help but marvel at its sheer size, even larger than the previous one. Sun Ki-hoon noticed Jinwoo wasn't struggling with the bags and initiated a conversation. He learned that it was Jinwoo's second time witnessing an A-rank gate, albeit his first time with Strike Squad B. Sun Ki-hoon explained that while the gate's size was impressive, the mana levels were lower than the one Jinwoo encountered the day before. He assured Jinwoo that the second tier squad was more than capable of handling the raid's challenges. Jinwoo observed the Strike Squad members, a team of 11 A ranks and 6 B ranks, all formidable hunters in their own right. He couldn't help but think about how Ju-hee, had she overcome her trauma, could have easily joined such a prestigious squad. Sun Ki-hoon, determined to prove himself as the official leader of Strike Squad B, rallied his team. An A rank healer eased Jinwoo's anxieties by assuring him that porters rarely became targets as long as the Strike Squad performed well. She explained the hierarchy of blame within a raid, placing the brunt of responsibility on the Strike Squad for the healer's safety. Jinwoo, however, couldn't shake off a strange sense of foreboding, similar to what he felt near the Red Gate. He tried to rationalize it away, reminding himself he wasn't even a member of the Strike Squad. As they ventured deeper into the dungeon, Sun Ki-hoon, brimming with confidence in his abilities and those of his team, prepared to lead his first official raid for the Hunters Guild. The battle ensues, with the Strike team launching a devastating attack on the first wave of enemies, the Dungeon Jackals. Their glowing red eyes and sharp teeth were no match for the coordinated assault from the experienced hunters. The scenes are gruesome as the mages unleash fiery spells, annihilating the Jackals with ease. However, confusion arose amongst the Strike team. Jinwoo, surprised by the presence of Jackals in an A-rank dungeon, questioned their normalcy. The A-rank healer clarified that Jackals, being C-rank beasts, were too weak to survive in such an environment. They usually fell prey to stronger monsters, making their population unsustainable within an A-ranked dungeon. These low-ranked beasts were out of place in an A-ranked dungeon, and the leash marks on their bodies revealed a disturbing truth. They weren't wild animals, but domesticated hunting dogs. Jinwoo recognized the intelligence behind this strategy, a cunning opponent that utilized beasts to weaken their defenses. As Jinwoo's sneaking suspicion unfolded, giant footsteps emerged from the shadows. The towering high orcs, each a colossal nightmare, wielding weapons that could cleave a man in two, instilling fear in the Strike team. Panic swept through the Strike Squad. Ki-hoon, their leader, barely managed to deflect a hurled spear with his shield, the impact sending tremors through his arm. The sheer strength of the orcs was unlike anything they'd encountered before. Ki-hoon's enchanted shield, a symbol of his rank and a source of pride, cracked under the impact, a testament to the raw, barbaric power of the high orcs. The hunter's skills, honed against lesser foes, proved useless against these monstrous warriors. Orcish axes cleaved through the squad's defenses, leaving a trail of carnage in their wake. Ki-hoon, his face etched with desperation, screamed at the mages to prioritize on protecting them. The mages, grim-faced, acknowledged the order but warned of their limited options. Unleashing their most potent spells, they rained fiery destruction upon the orcs. The dungeon momentarily illuminated with the brilliance of their attacks, but the victory cry died in their throats as the orcs emerged unscathed. They were immune to magic. One of the mages, realizing the dire situation, contemplated a desperate gamble. She could summon a powerful beast, a last resort that would leave her drained of mana and vulnerable, but the thought of letting her comrades fall without a fight spurred her on. The battle descended into a desperate struggle for survival. Hunters fell one by one, their armor offering little protection against the Orcish onslaught. Tanks, tasked with holding the defensive line, found their provocation skills useless as the orcs ignored their taunts. Kahun, forced to make a heart-wrenching decision, ordered the squad to split into smaller clusters to avoid being surrounded. Disbelief washed over Kahun as he grasped the evilness of their difficult situation. The association's assessment had been a colossal blunder. This wasn't just an A-rank dungeon, it was a death trap teeming with over 20 high orcs, each a match for an A-rank hunter. The B-rank hunters were hopelessly outmatched, and even the A-rank hunters, though stronger, would be overwhelmed if their weaker comrades fell. Kahun braced himself for casualties, a grim reality of the desperate fight they were involved in. One of the mages, her eyes alight with determination, unleashed a spell so powerful that it bathed the orc in a blinding glow. The magic gripped him tightly, a radiant force meant to subdue, but the orc shook off the enchantment with unsettling ease. His gaze swept the battlefield, settling on the healer, who was desperately tending to the wounded. In an instant he surged forward, his pace swift and relentless. The mage's voice cut through the chaos, a scream of warning that was almost drowned by the clamor of the fight. "Watch out," she cried. But the healer, her eyes wide with terror, only managed a trembling nod before closing them, bracing herself for the inevitable. The fear in her eyes was palpable, a silent plea that went unanswered as the orc closed the distance, his shadow looming larger with every heartbeat. Just as despair threatened to consume them, a miracle unfolded. As an orc charged towards a terrified healer, a blur of movement intervened. Jinwoo, the unassuming porter, emerged from the shadows with inhuman speed. In a single fluid motion, he sliced through the orc's throat, his blade a whisper of death. The colossal beast collapsed with a deafening thud, its blood splattering on the stunned healer. The strike squad, momentarily speechless, could only stare in disbelief at what just happened. The tide of the battle turned abruptly. Kahun, bewildered by the sudden shift in momentum, watched as Jinwoo, a blur of inhuman speed, danced among the orcs. His movements were a lethal symphony, each strike a calculated blow that sent orcs crumpling to the ground. The remaining orcs, weakened and disoriented by this unseen assailant, fell prey to the renewed offensive of the hunters. Mages unleashed a torrent of spells that finally pierced the orcs' defenses. Relief washed over the squad as they brought down the remaining beasts one by one. A wave of guilt washed over Jinwoo as a splatter of orc blood landed on him. These were elite hunters, the best the guild had to offer, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were woefully unprepared for this encounter. He trusted their skills, yet the memory of the healer's near-death experience gnawed at him. He couldn't stand by and let these monstrous creatures potentially inflict further harm. A notification flashed across Jinwoo's vision. He had leveled up by assisting the squad. This was a revelation. He could grow stronger by fighting alongside others. But the knowledge that he could have defeated all the orcs himself was a tempting proposition. However, the guild had paid a hefty sum for the dungeon permit, and interfering directly wouldn't be right. He decided to settle for subtly weakening the orcs, leaving the final blows to the hunters. The battle ended with a collective sigh of relief. Strike Squad B had emerged victorious. Though pretty beaten up, no one was seriously injured, a near miracle considering the initial onslaught. However, suspicion flickered in the eyes of one of the mages. Being a magic caster herself, she couldn't help but notice the subtle distortions in the air, the signs of a camouflage skill being used. The healer, recounting her experience, mentioned witnessing an orc being ripped apart mid-air. The possibility of an unseen spellcaster arose. Gina, the squad's sole telekinetic user, furiously denied any involvement. Their team lacked the magic necessary for such feats. The suspicion then shifted towards Jinwoo, the unassuming porter. Sweat beaded on his brow as he realized he might be exposed. Realizing the potential consequences of revealing Jinwoo's secret, the mage decided to stay silent for now. The most important thing she thought was that there was someone inside this dungeon that's powerful enough to cast such an advanced spell. They needed to get out of there and report their findings to the guild. Kahun, the leader, acknowledged the lingering mystery. The orcs' behavior had undeniably shifted during the second half of the battle, allowing for an easier victory. The question of who or what intervened remained unanswered. Despite the victory, the squad was wary. They had encountered high orcs at the very entrance, a terrifying prospect considering the unknown dangers that might lurk deeper within. A heated debate arose. Some argued for continuing the raid, fueled by the adrenaline of their recent victory. Others, shaken by the ordeal, advocated for a strategic retreat. Kahun, torn between his ambition and responsibility for his team's safety, wrestled with the decision. Jinwoo silently observed, understanding the weight of Kahun's choice. Every hunter craved the glory of conquering a dungeon, but a wise leader knew when to cut their losses. Finally, Kahun made the call that they would retreat, recognizing the need for safety over ambition. As the squad prepared to leave, some of them expressed relief, fearing they would be forced to continue. Kahun, attempting to reassure his team, instructed them to head out, but their departure was abruptly halted. As they prepared to leave, Kahun's voice boomed. A magical barrier blocked their exit. Panic surged through the group. This wasn't there before. The mages confirmed it could be dispelled, but it would take time. The gravity of the situation sunk in. This was far beyond their capabilities. The initial relief of victory evaporated, replaced by a chilling realization they had stumbled upon a foe far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. Gina, realizing the urgency, attempted to lift the barrier with her spells, but her efforts were in vain. The mana waves produced by this barrier were so intense that even hunters who couldn't usually perceive mana waves could feel them. This was on an entirely different level. The question lingered. Why hadn't anyone detected these powerful mana waves from outside the dungeon? It suggested that the boss had the ability to conceal its presence. The situation worsened. A sudden curse swept through the dungeon, targeting only the mages. They convulsed, coughing up blood, their eyes glazing over. Kahun shouted in alarm for a divine spell to counter the curse, but fear hung heavy in the air. The strike squad, triumphant moments ago, now faced a terrifying new threat, their future hanging in the balance. Hope flickered briefly before being extinguished by a wave of terror. Emerging from the magical barrier, a legion of orcs, even more formidable than the first, surged forth. Their imposing forms and the raw power radiating from them sent a shiver down the spines of the squad. Fear, raw and unconcealed, flickered in their eyes. Kahun, his voice tight with despair, acknowledged their awful situation. Fighting was a guaranteed death sentence. He yearned for the presence of the guild's most powerful hunters, Mr. Choi and Miss Cha, who might have turned the tide. The orcs, with a discord of growls and roars, displayed their menacing weapons, their sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. One of the orcs, seemingly larger and more imposing than the others, addressed them in a surprisingly clear human tongue. He introduced himself as Kargalgan, the mighty shaman of the orcs. The revelation of a talking orc sparked confusion and suspicion amongst the squad. Was this sorcery, a puppet controlled by some unseen entity? The thought of negotiating with a monstrous beast was absurd. Some members of the squad advocated for a desperate fight, a last stand against the inevitable. Kahun, however, saw a glimmer of hope. He directed a question at Kargalgan. Was he the one who erected the barrier? The shaman confirmed his role, hinting at a far more powerful entity residing within the cave. The battered mages, their faces etched with pain, corroborated his claim. The magic barrier was beyond their capabilities to dispel. Kahun pressed on, inquiring about the existence of a creature mightier than Kargalgan. The shaman's response was a challenge: either face his soldiers or follow them. With a heavy heart, Kahun made the impossible decision that they would comply. A chorus of panicked protests erupted from the squad, but Kahun remained resolute. This was their only chance. Jinwoo, observing the turn of events, understood the gravity of the situation. They were headed straight into the heart of the enemy's lair, where even more high orcs awaited. Kahun's plan, as desperate as it was to launch a surprise attack on the boss. If successful, it might disrupt the magic barrier, allowing Jinwoo to escape and seek reinforcements. Kahun approached Jinwoo, his voice laden with determination. He explained the plan, a surprise attack on the boss. While the squad created a diversion, Jinwoo had to escape and alert the main strike squad. Jinwoo, however, expressed doubt. By the time help arrived, it would be too late. Kahun countered. Their primary objective was to seal the dungeon, not guarantee their survival. The fate of many hinged on their success. The A-rank healer entrusted Jinwoo with her will, a final message for her family in case of her demise. They were trained for such situations, but Jinwoo, an outsider, deserved a chance to live. Jinwoo accepted the will, vowing to find another way to deliver it. He may not have known the full extent of the boss's power, but the intensity of the mana waves emanating from within left no room for doubt. This was a formidable foe, yet Jinwoo refused to surrender. The battle was far from over. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, Hae In, completely unaware of the dire situation unfolding within, visited the mining facility in search of Jinwoo. Learning of his absence and his role as a porter for Strike Squad B, a wave of shock washed over her. An E-rank hunter, a porter in a high-risk A-rank dungeon. This made no sense. Her suspicions grew. The image of Jinwoo wielding a weapon near the boss's lair from the previous day resurfaced in her mind. Something wasn't right. Fueled by a surge of determination, Hae In decided to enter the dungeon herself. The miners, confused by her sudden change of plans, offered her a pickaxe, the only weapon at their disposal. Hae In, though clearly frustrated by the lack of a proper weapon, steeled her resolve and charged into the dungeon, ready to face whatever awaited her. The scene shifts to a colossal cavern resembling a grand arena. The dim light barely illuminated the vastness of the hall, its walls adorned with red banners and flickering torches that cast a warm yet intense glow. Stone statues and intricate carvings adorned the walls, lending an air of ancient grandeur. Multi-tiered balconies lined the cavern, connected by heavy chains that added a medieval touch. The only source of illumination seemed to come from the glowing red eyes of hundreds of hulking orcs that surrounded the Strike Squad. These were no ordinary orcs. Their muscles bulged like iron beneath thick hides, and their eyes burned with an unnatural crimson light that spoke of dark magic and immense power, a sight that both awed and terrified the Strike Squad. A wave of chills ran down the spines of the squad as they found themselves vastly outnumbered. Ki-hoon, the leader, understood the gravity of the situation. If such an army escaped the dungeon, they could easily decimate a small city before the arrival of high-ranking hunters. Their only hope was to vanquish the boss. The boss was in the center of the cavern, seated on a large throne that accentuated his power and command. Was the orc leader. He wore a red cape, a horned helmet, and formidable armor decorated with glowing blue symbols. A massive weapon rested in his hand, a testament to his readiness for battle. 4 imposing beasts guarded him, adding to the daunting aura. Defeating the shaman and his elite guard seemed like an insurmountable challenge. When Ki-hoon gives the signal, we attack all at once. The squad members rallied each other, their target clear, the shaman. "Do you fear me, humans?" The shaman boomed, his voice echoing in the cavern. A collective gasp escaped the squad. The raw power emanating from him was overwhelming. "How are we supposed to fight this guy?" A mage whimpered, feeling utterly insignificant compared to this monstrous entity. "He's in a league of his own." The sheer disparity between their powers was demoralizing. Ki-hoon, trying to grasp the situation, questioned why the shaman had brought them all the way into the dungeon instead of simply killing them on the spot. The shaman's response was chilling in its simplicity. It was for fun. Ki-hoon struggled to comprehend this, but the shaman elaborated, explaining that it intended to entertain its soldiers by killing the humans one by one for the remaining time inside the dungeon. The shaman then noted something unusual about one of the squad members, indicating Jinwoo. Ki-hoon, processing the shaman's words, realized with horror that they were being used as mere entertainment. To their enemies, their lives were nothing more than toys to be played with and discarded at whim. This revelation deepened their despair, as they understood their worthlessness in the eyes of the shaman and its soldiers. Fueled by a surge of defiance, Ki-hoon roared, "Everyone charge!" The squad launched a desperate assault on the boss, but their attacks were met with a shimmering barrier, the hymn of protection. Ki-hoon, the first to reach the shaman, recoiled as he slammed into the invisible shield. In a swift and decisive move, the shaman activated his spell of gravity acceleration. The spell's immense power caused Ki-hoon to be hurled high into the air, leaving him momentarily weightless and helpless. Then, with a brutal, unrelenting force, he was slammed back onto the ground. The impact was severe, and the blow blow was devastating. Blood gushed from Cahoon's eyes and mouth, painting a gruesome picture of the damage inflicted upon him. The squad members stood in utter disbelief, their minds struggling to process the horrifying scene before them. Their initial resolve and bravery seemed to waver as they watched their comrades suffer such a grievous blow. All they could do, paralyzed by shock and fear, was scream his name, Ki-hoon, their voices echoing the desperation and helplessness they felt in that harrowing moment. Just as despair threatened to consume them, Jinwoo stepped forward. His eyes glowing with an otherworldly blue light emanated an aura that demanded attention. He knelt beside the fallen Ki-hoon. "This dungeon belongs to the Hunters Guild," Jinwoo addressed Ki-hoon, his voice firm. "I know I'm not supposed to interfere, but these high orcs will slaughter your entire squad. Do you give me permission to kill all the beasts in this dungeon?" Before Ki-hoon could respond, an elite orc lunged at Jinwoo. With lightning reflexes honed by his heightened senses, Jinwoo summoned his shadow soldier Iron. Iron intercepted the orc with a deadly blow, eliminating the threat before it could land. "Do I have your permission to take care of all the beasts in this dungeon?" Jinwoo repeated, his gaze unwavering. Battered and bruised, Ki-hoon rasped, "Please, I beg you." The shaman, intrigued by Jinwoo's display of power, cackled, "Interesting abilities for a mere human, but how long do you think your little trick will work on us?" Jinwoo, unfazed by the shaman's mockery, acknowledged the formidable energy he sensed. "This is the strongest opponent I've ever faced," he admitted. A steely glint entered his eyes. "However, I feel sorry to say this, but this is a terrible matchup. For you, I mean, not me." With a decisive gesture, Jinwoo summoned his entire arsenal, Igris, Iron, Ice Bear, and the others. The cavern trembled with anticipation as Jinwoo and his shadow soldiers faced off against the shaman and his elite orc army. An epic clash, a battle between gods, was about to unfold. Outside the gate, the arrival of the hunter surveillance team at the mining site caused a stir. Kim Chul, the lead agent, inquired about Sung Jinwoo's whereabouts, suspecting the S-rank hunters' motives for joining the mining crew. The miners, unaware of Sung Jinwoo's true power, harbored fear and suspicion towards him. They revealed that Sung Jinwoo had volunteered to replace the missing porter and ventured into the gate with the strike squad. Kim Chul's concern grew further upon learning Hae In, the vice guild master of the Hunters Guild, had also entered the gate searching for Sung Jinwoo. As Kim Chul was heading back to his car, he felt a disturbing shift in the atmosphere. A surge of malicious energy jolted him, a feeling so potent it threatened to tear him apart. It was a monstrous mana signature, far exceeding the level expected for an A-rank gate. Panic surged through him as he realized the association had made a grave mistake in underestimating the gate's true threat. With a miscalculated threat level, the strike squad formed for the gate would be woefully unprepared. Hope remained, however, as two S ranks, Sung Jinwoo and Hae In, were already inside, yet a sense of urgency gripped Kim Chul. The gate loomed ominously. He knew he had to enter at once to understand the situation fully. Meanwhile, Miss Cha ventured deeper into the dungeon. The sight of slain high orcs confirmed the strike squad's success. However, the overwhelming mana radiating from the dungeon's heart filled her with dread. It was clear the strike squad wouldn't stand a chance against such a powerful boss monster. Determined, Hae In pressed onward towards the heart of the dungeon where the true battle was about to unfold. The battlefield was a maelstrom of steel and fury. Jinwoo stood firm, his shadow soldiers a whirlwind of death around him, but the orcish horde pressed in relentlessly. "How can you fight an army with just a few puppets?" The shaman boomed, his voice dripping with condescension. Jinwoo, ever confident, countered, "You'll regret underestimating me and my shadows." He activated his skill, Monarch's Domain, granting his shadow soldiers a 50% boost to their stats. This was a new job-specific skill which he obtained after reaching level 70 at the Demon's Castle. His shadow soldiers had grown considerably stronger. The sight confounded the human mages. What's happening? Even I can't summon more than 2 beasts. How can a human wield such dark magic? They sputtered in disbelief. The shaman, impatient, roared for his warriors to attack. Iron, unfazed by the orcish boasts, used his Shout of Provocation skill, but against opponents of such high caliber, it had no effect. Undeterred, Iron charged in with his massive axe, cleaving through orcs like butter. His dominance absolute. Igris, wielding his massive sword, ripped through the orcish defenses, carving a bloody path through their midst. Chaos reigned. Jinwoo, a blur of lethal precision, danced through the orcish ranks, his dagger a reaper, leaving leaving a trail of dismembered bodies in his wake. The coppery tang of blood filled the air, a gruesome spectacle. Just like our Vice Guild master, a wounded A-rank healer gasped. Why would such a powerful hunter volunteer as a porter? Jinwoo, amidst the carnage, assessed the situation. All except Igris, Iron, and Tank were roughly B-rank hunter equivalents in strength. They were being systematically wiped out, 3 or 4 to 1 against the superior high orcs. The enemy force outnumbered him by more than 3 to 1. He had to eliminate as many as possible. Suddenly, the shaman unleashed the Hymn of the Fire Dragon, a searing breath that decimated Jinwoo's shadow soldiers. What the hell? Jinwoo cried out, his eyes widening in shock. The shaman mocked him. Foolish human, relying on your weak puppets to do your bidding, Jinwoo smirked. High and mighty, my shadows regenerate infinitely as long as I have mana. Regeneration is meaningless. Your mana will run out eventually. The rate at which my warriors kill your shadows will drain you. Jinwoo, his patience wearing thin, launched himself into the air, aiming to strike down the shaman. But the barrier, the Hymn of Protection, repelled him. Futile effort, the shaman taunted, while you waste your time, your precious army dwindles. Unfazed, Jinwoo countered, you worry too much about my mana reserves. My shadows are holding their own quite well. Refusing to back down, the shaman unleashed the Hymn of Blazing Fire, a fiery inferno that engulfed Jinwoo's remaining shadow soldiers. This boss is stronger than both Vulcan and Matthias. Matthias commanded an army of undead, but his defenses were weak. Kargalgan, in contrast, boasts exceptional defenses and powerful sorcery. On top of that, Jinwoo is surrounded by over 100 high orcs. The odds are stacked against him and he is forced into close combat, but this isn't a job change quest. The circumstances are different this time. A sly grin spread across Jinwoo's face. He accessed his inventory. Potions could be used here, a means to replenish his mana reserves. He wouldn't guzzle them down recklessly. This had to be a spectacle. He'd showcase the true power of a necromancer. After downing a potion, Jinwoo issued a chilling command, arise. The fallen orcs, reanimated by his dark magic, began to rise, joining his ranks as undead soldiers. What sorcery is this? The shaman shrieked in terror. My warriors turned undead. Jinwoo's voice boomed with dark authority. Many of yours still live, but soon they too will become one with my shadows, and ultimately, you will as well. Impossible. Could he be a monarch? The shaman stammered, his confidence shaken. This question gnawed at his mind, a terrifying possibility that added a new layer of urgency and fear to the already fierce conflict. Monarchs were beings of immense power, commanding respect and dread across all realms. The very thought that they might be facing such a formidable foe was almost paralyzing. The battlefield was a chaotic clash of the living and the dead, with undead orcs fiercely pitted against their living counterparts. The scene was a stunning, almost surreal tableau of violence and raw power. The living orcs, with their flesh and blood vigor, fought with a desperate, frantic energy, their eyes blazing with the will to survive. In stark contrast, the undead orcs moved with a grim, inexorable determination, their eyes empty but for a faint, otherworldly glow that spoke of their undying resolve. The shaman reflected on their predicament, questioning how they had ended up in this dire situation. Upon waking up in the dungeon, they had been greeted by a single, relentless command: hunt the humans. There was no need for reason or explanation. They were simply following orders, driven by an unyielding compulsion to obey. The shaman's thoughts were a stark reminder of the grim reality they faced, a reality shaped by an unseen force dictating their every move. Driven by desperation, he rallied his remaining generals to finish off Jinwoo and bring back his corpse. Jinwoo, watching the generals enter the fray, smirked. The battle was intensifying as the generals finally joined in. One of the generals targeted Iron and charged at him. With his sheer brute force, Iron met the general head on. In just 2 powerful strikes, he cut the general down, demonstrating his overwhelming strength. Another general stepped into the fray, showing no hesitation. Iron, undeterred, faced him directly. With a mighty swing of his long axe, he pierced through the general's armor, shattering it and bringing the general down with devastating force. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, 2 enemy generals leaped into the fight against Igris. They coordinated their attack, jumping into the air and swinging their massive swords at him. Igris, however, was prepared. He skillfully defended against their initial assault, blocking their strikes with precision. Then, showcasing his remarkable agility and athleticism, Igris counterattacked. He leaped into the air, slashing one of the generals with his blade in a swift, lethal motion. As the injured general fell, Igris finished him off by stomping him to death. Seeing his comrade fall, the second general tried to take advantage of the situation and charged at Igris. Little did he know, Iron was right behind him. Seizing the opportunity, Iron thrust his axe into the unsuspecting general. The ice bear then joined in, using its massive claws to slam the general to the ground. With a final crushing blow, the ice bear tore the general to pieces, ending his threat decisively. Looks like my boys have the upper hand. A hint of satisfaction in his voice, but a nagging worry gnawed at him. His mana wasn't replenishing fast enough with just the potions. If he ran out, all his shadow soldiers would vanish. The shaman, his frustration mounting, roared, "Why can't this be stopped? How is this possible?" The strike squad, inspired by Jinwoo's defiance, decided to intervene. They charged towards the fray, weapons raised. The shaman, anticipating their interference, unleashed a barrage of debilitating spells. Hymn of Agony, Hymn of Blazing Fire, Hymn of Blindness. "The audience won't ruin my performance," he roared. "Silence that arrogant voice." Further spells followed Hymn of Slumber, Hymn of Lethargy. He aimed to shut them down completely. Jinwoo, however, remained unaffected. He'd activated his immunity skill, rendering him impervious to the shaman's curses. "Don't you remember what I said?" he taunted. "You and I are a terrible matchup." A notification popped up. "The great spellcaster Kandiaru's Blessing, permanent effect, longevity. You will be immune to all diseases, poisonous substances, and any other abnormalities in your status. Regeneration abilities will exponentially increase while asleep." Jinwoo, assessing the situation, decided to eliminate the shaman's annoying shield. He summoned his Shadow Mage and equipped it with the Orb of Avarice, a powerful artifact known for its destructive capabilities. With the Orb of Avarice in hand, the Shadow Mage conjured a massive fireball. The fiery sphere grew larger and more menacing by the second, radiating intense heat and energy. The Shadow Mage then hurled the giant fireball directly at the shaman's shield. The fireball collided with the shield with tremendous force, resulting in a massive explosion. The impact was so powerful that it utterly shattered the shield, breaking it into countless fragments that scattered in all directions. The shaman stood in stunned disbelief. His shield, which had always been an impenetrable defense, had never been destroyed before. The shaman couldn't comprehend how anyone could have the power to obliterate his shield, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. In the distance, Hae In, the Vice Guild Master, finally reached the scene. Her jaw dropped as she witnessed the spectacle of Jinwoo surrounded by an army of undead orcs battling a monstrous orc leader. Couldn't believe her eyes. What was she seeing? Could those creatures be summoned beasts? Normally, mage-type hunters specializing in summoning magic could only handle 1 or 2 beasts at most. Yet before her, there were far more than that. Confusion spread through the strike squad as they noticed her presence. One of them pointed out that the Vice Guild Master was there, and Hae In approached them with concern. She asked if they were all right and what had happened, but the squad members were just as clueless as she was, unable to explain the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. The enraged shaman unleashed a torrent of spells. Hymn of Rage, Hymn of Reinforcement, Hymn of Giants, Hymn of Combustion. "You pesky insect, I'll squash you to death," he roared. Jinwoo, however, remained undaunted. "Not again with the giants," he grumbled, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Don't get cocky, human." The shaman roared. "I've been toying with you until now. I am the Almighty Kargalgan. Do I still look like an easy opponent?" The shaman grew in size, transforming into a massive orc. His size was immense, far larger than any of his soldiers. In a display of immense power, he conjured a gigantic magic fireball. With a roar, he hurled the blazing sphere at Jinwoo, the sheer intensity of the attack illuminating the entire scene. The torrent of fire rained down heavily, creating a chaotic and fiery landscape. Amidst the chaos, Jinwoo saw his chance. He leaped into the air with agility and precision. As he soared towards the shaman, he gripped his dagger tightly. Using all his strength, he aimed and struck the shaman's eyes with the blade. The impact was brutal, and the shaman screamed in agony, his roar echoing across the battlefield. The scene was gruesome, blood and pain mingling with the fiery destruction around them. Jinwoo's strategy had paid off. Jinwoo landed gracefully, a cold glint in his eyes. Growing bigger only makes you easier to target. A mage without his defenses can't defend against an assassin's strike. Jinchul, arriving at the scene, was utterly dumbfounded by the spectacle before him. The battlefield was a chaotic mix of Jinwoo's undead orcs and the remaining living orcs. "What in God's name is happening right now?" Jinchul gasped. Hae In, the Vice Guild Master, explained, "Those are beasts summoned by that hunter, Mr. Sung Jinwoo. Jinwoo continued his assault on the shaman. He quickly realized that his dagger wasn't powerful enough to take down the shaman completely. Switching tactics, he started using his bare hands. Clenching his fists, he landed devastating blows one after another. Each punch was delivered with immense strength, targeting the shaman's most vulnerable spots. The relentless barrage of attacks left the shaman reeling, unable to defend against Jinwoo's ferocious onslaught. The scene was intense, with Jinwoo's fists pounding into the shaman, showing his sheer determination and power in battle. Hae In was taken aback. It wasn't just Mr. Choi who was aware of the situation. Even the manager of the surveillance team knew about him. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the already confusing circumstances, suggesting that more people were involved or informed than she had initially thought. Jinwoo, still grappling with the situation, continued. I came to help the strike squad after detecting intense mana waves from the gate, but it looks like my help won't be needed here. Mr. Sung is currently clearing an A-rank dungeon all by himself. So this is what he's truly capable of? He's no doubt one of the best fighter-type hunters, but he can also use summoning magic? How many beasts can he control? Hae In, desperate for answers, turned to Jinwoo. Who the hell is this guy? Do you know him? Jinwoo offered a cryptic reply. A little, just a little bit. The shaman, defeated and broken, dragged himself on the ground. Jinwoo, backed by his shadow army, stood firm, his gaze cold and unwavering. The moment you lost your guard, Jinwoo declared, you had no chance of winning. The shaman, on the brink of death, sputtered, impossible. There is no way you broke through the great Kargalgan's defenses. Before he could finish, Jinwoo's shadow army descended upon him, delivering the final blow. The shaman's screams echoed through the dungeon. A notification materialized before Jinwoo. You have defeated the boss, level up. Jinwoo acknowledged his victory. Jinwoo had just emerged victorious after a fierce battle with the boss. His soldiers were efficiently handling the remaining high orcs, ensuring the area was secure. With the immediate threat neutralized, Jinwoo turned his attention to the spoils of his victory. However, he was mindful of the fact that the dungeon was the property of the Hunters Guild. Taking the A-rank boss's loot would be excessive and greedy, so he decided against it. Instead, Jinwoo focused on something unique to his abilities, shadow extraction. Standing over the fallen boss, Jinwoo took a moment to gather his strength. With a determined expression, he extended his hand over the lifeless form of Kargalgan's. The air around him seemed to hum with anticipation. Arise, he commanded, his voice echoing with an authority that resonated through the cavernous dungeon. The sound reverberated off the walls, amplifying the power behind the single word. In response to his command, a deep, guttural roar filled the air. It was as if the very essence of the dungeon was reacting to Jinwoo's will. Shadows began to coalesce around the body of Kargalgan, swirling and merging into a dark, ethereal form. The fallen boss's figure started to rise, enveloped in the inky blackness of the shadow magic. The transformation was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The shadow of Kargalgan stood before Jinwoo, a testament to his power and mastery over the shadows. This was no ordinary resurrection. It was a display of dominance over life and death itself. The members of the strike squad, including Hae In and Jinwoo, watched in stunned silence. Their eyes widened in disbelief, and their jaws dropped as they witnessed the impossible. The raw power and control Jinwoo exhibited were beyond anything they had ever encountered. The sheer scale and impact of the shadow extraction left them utterly speechless, their minds struggling to grasp the reality of what they were seeing. Jinwoo, surprised by his own power, remarked, now that you're a shadow, you're a whole lot calmer. Standard, elite, and knight. These were the only 3 ranks I knew about until now. This is my first time seeing another rank. How befitting for a boss of an A-rank dungeon. What did he say his name was again? Something. Sorry, I can't remember. I'll just give you a new name. Tusk. I'll call you Tusk from now on. The addition of Kargalgan's shadow to his army was a significant win for Jinwoo. Obtaining an army of high orcs was a huge win for me. I can now preserve 127 shadows. I'll return some back to the world of nothingness and preserve the rest. Unaware of the hidden audience, Jinwoo continued his internal monologue. Suddenly, Jinwoo's voice cut through the silence. Mr. Sung Jinwoo. Jinwoo's expression contorted in shock. Woo Jinwoo and Hae In. I didn't even notice they were here. How do I get myself out of this mess? The strike squad naturally had questions, but Jinwoo intervened. We're from the surveillance team. He explained, the Hunters Association is in charge of protecting Mr. Sung Jinwoo's identity, which cannot be revealed to the public. This is a top secret matter. We will explain the confidentiality clause in detail once everyone exits this gate. You must not tell anyone about the events you have witnessed here today. Jim Chul addressed Jinwoo directly. Mr. Sung, let us escort you outside. This is the best way to avoid any unnecessary conflict. He then turned to the strike squad. Just now, Mr. Sung fought off an army of beasts in front of the largest and wealthiest guild in South Korea. His strength surpasses that of an S-rank hunter. If you have any questions, please make an inquiry through the association. Now, we will help all of you make a quiet exit. Hoon, the squad leader, lingered for a moment. Wait, he said, his voice filled with newfound respect. You're a powerful hunter, so I can see why your identity must be kept a secret. I won't ask why you volunteered to be our porter. You saved our lives, so I just want to thank you on behalf of our strike squad. Jinwoo turned to the healer who had managed to survive the intense battle. With a slight smile, he suggested that since she hadn't died, she could deliver her will herself. The healer, initially taken aback by his words, paused for a moment, processing what he had said. Realizing the humor in the situation, she then broke into a laugh, relieved and amused at the unexpected turn of events. Jim Chul, ever the practical one, broke the brief respite by urging everyone to get moving. The team needed to regroup and exit the dungeon now that their primary objective was complete. Meanwhile, the mage, still processing the extraordinary events that had unfolded, turned to Hae In with a puzzled expression. She had noticed something odd and couldn't resist asking about it. Miss Cha, why did you bring a pickaxe with you? Hae In seemed momentarily flustered by the question and considered how her actions might have been perceived as weird by Jinwoo. She blushed. Never mind, she thought to herself, pushing aside her embarrassment. With that, the group concluded their mission and prepared to exit the dungeon. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Until next time, happy watching.